Hello and welcome, Radio Zindagi listeners. You are tuned in to 11:70 a.m. and this is RJ Vedika welcoming you all on yet another episode of Illuminating Mind Matters with BASANT. BASANT, which stands for Bay Area South Asian Network of Therapists, is a non-profit organization raising awareness and advocating for mental health issues that affect the South Asian community. They help the community members with educational resources and help them connect with culturally competent mental health professionals. If you would like to know more about Basant, basantnow.org would be their website, or you can give them a call 510-770-6223. And we bring this show every Wednesday, 12:30 to 1 p.m. With that information given, let me welcome the host of our show, Shalini Dayal, who is a marriage family therapist. Welcome, Shalini. Let's start the show.
Thank you, Vedika. Hi, listeners, and welcome to another show of Illuminating Mind Matters. I am Shalini, and I have the pleasure of welcoming Evylyn Cochran, who is a marriage and family therapist in the Bay Area, to our show today to talk about couples therapy from the perspective of emotionally focused therapy, or EFT, as we call it. So Evylyn has been in practice since 1989. She's originally from Wisconsin and moved to California in 1996. She's of mixed cultures. Her mother immigrated from Brazil and her father is German. Her primary orientation for therapy is emotionally focused therapy, along with in-depth therapy interventions from internal family systems and lifespan integration. She works with individuals, couples, and families. Her practice is in the Tri-City area, and she sees people from all over California because thanks to Zoom. And her hobbies are gardening. She has 11 rose bushes, loves to hike, practices yoga, and volunteers at the Ohlone Humane Society regularly. And hopefully, when the pandemic is ending, she's able to go back and do that again. So welcome, Evylyn, and thank you for making time for Illuminating Mind Matters from your very busy schedule. So to begin, tell us a little bit about emotionally focused therapy and your couples work.
Okay. Emotionally focused therapy is a model that was developed by Dr. Susan Johnson and Dr. Les Greenberg. The model that I'm trained in is with Dr. Susan Johnson, and it's a model that can work with couples, families, and with individuals as well. And the way it's structured, it's based on, I'm going to say, my language would be the heart. Right?
Mhm.
It's based on attachment theory. If you're a psychotherapist, you probably were trained and read Bowlby and those things. And the idea is that pretty simply, we need each other.
Mhm.
And when we feel distress, it's because there's some kind of separation
Mhm.
in whether it's communication or culture or something, and that activates our system, and then we do things to try to get that back. That's a
Mhm.
real short nutshell. Do you want to ask me some more questions about it to kind of clarify?
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
How do you see attachment play out, say, in couples that you see?
Okay.
Some of the common examples of where attachment has been disrupted or
Okay.
there's dysfunctional attachment. Give us some
Okay.
examples so it will help us understand what
Okay.
attachment is.
Yeah. Well, the overall goal of, I think, any couples work is increased couple satisfaction,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think ideally, what the language that we use is that we want people to get to a place where they have secure attachment,
Hmm.
secure connection, where they can send a clear signal and they get a clear response and they feel comforted and responded
Hmm.
to, and vice versa. What you see is that typically people get stuck in a pattern that's really negative and
Hmm.
distressful, and there's probably three classic patterns. One where there's we call it pursue,
Hmm.
or kind of find the bad guy. It can almost look like attack, defend. My
Hmm.
point's better than your point. Round and around and around.
Hmm.
That's one pattern that you see. Another pattern is where one person tends to pursue and pick and maybe
Hmm.
criticize or demand, and the other person shrinks away and
Hmm.
is more internal, cognitive, does his or her own thing. That's another pattern. And then the third pattern is when both parties sort of avoid and withdraw. And they kind of have a hollow, they don't feel connected. They don't necessarily feel bad, but they just sort of do their own thing. And they've coped with not knowing how to connect by just sort of having separate lives. So those would be three classic sort of patterns that would show up in our office that people experience. Most people can relate to one of those. You know.
So, and thank you for explaining that there's three different, like, what you see, behavior patterns and attachment patterns that happen in couple. And I'm speaking as a therapist who works with the South Asian community. I'm familiar with all of these. And I think, especially when it comes to violence, and and violence is not just physical violence, but emotional and verbal violence, gaslighting. And how does EFT, emotionally focused therapy, address issues of violence?
Well, I think, as a therapist, Shanley, we have to be very, very careful about when we can do in-depth couples work, if there actually is extreme verbal or extreme physical violence, right? We have to assess for that. I think almost interpersonal violence happens, whether it's a cycle of rigid pattern that can't be broken, is really important. So the way EFT would, just like any other therapy, is we would have to assess, can the therapist make it safe? Can the therapist make it safe in the office? And is what's happening in the office, the vulnerability that can come up during sessions, will that be used against? And that's kind of what you have to look at. And if you sense that it can be used against each other, then maybe individual therapy first, or parallel. So you have a team of people to help and support people learn how to be different. Because typically, if somebody becomes aggressive or violent, it's because their needs aren't being met, and they don't know how to be different. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And it brings up to another topic, which very often comes up, is violence is very much normalized. And in many of our societies, verbal and emotional violence. And how do you help your clients draw appropriate boundaries and create safety in the sessions and outside?
What you have to do is you have to be, it's not like individual therapy where you're just sort of sitting and listening. You have to be a very active therapist, and you draw boundaries by insisting that you let the couple help you slow them down, which is easier said than done. And sometimes what you have to do is you have to match the person's pain. You match the person's pain, and then you bring it down. And sometimes you have to say things like, if you continue to attack each other, I can't help you. But if we slow it down, we can find out what's here, and we can help you guys connect differently. So it's a slow process, but the key is to be insistent on slowing the couple down.
And one of the things that comes up when people come in for relationship counseling, they sometimes they ask me, is like, can you fix it? I mean, how many sessions do I need to fix this? It's like, what do you say?
Well, EFT is supposed to be a short-term model that you can do in 20 sessions. And all the clinicians on the ground who didn't do the research weren't on this, because they screen people for research subjects too, right? Who can kind of zoom through the process. We say if you have trauma, if people have trauma, if they have, and different cultural backgrounds, if they have immigration histories, it's gonna be much slower. So I tell people, if you've been married 40 years and one of you has had 3 affairs and there's been illness, oops, you okay? Okay. Yeah, there's been illness, there's been all this stuff. It's going to take longer. If you've been together 2 years and you don't have a lot of that, it's going to be shorter. Does that make sense? And you just have to see what you get in there. I mean, I tell people, well, let's try 20 sessions. If they want a distinct measurement, I said, let's try 20 sessions. On average is a year to 2 years.
Yes. I think that is very important, that I do want to like make a point of that relationship therapy is not an overnight thing. People come in with from very short-term relationships as well, 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year, and well, they say, well, we should be able to fix it in 3 sessions. So no, thank you for clarifying. Relationship therapy and EFT model does take time, and I know being trained.
I'd say the shortest 20 sessions for a couple
Totally.
that hasn't been together very long. It doesn't have a lot of rigidity in their established pattern, right? And I don't know if you talked about this on your program before, but most people, they go about life and they think, well, it'll get better, or we'll talk to the counselor later, or we've got to raise the children. It's like 5 to 7 years of being distressed and being in a rigid negative pattern that before people pick up the phone or go on the internet or whatever. And so it took that long to get stuck. It's going to take a little time to get unstuck.
I hear you. So before I ask you more questions, I'm seeing Vedika like looking very interested. And so I just want to throw her in and say, hey, Vedika, do you have any thoughts and questions for Evylyn?
So first of all, I'm always interested in all the wonderful topics you bring, Shalini, and all the incredible guests you bring along.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you so much, Evylyn, for talking about the attachment issue. And I think it is, in a way, not just looking at the problem, but the cause. What is causing the problem? And that is a final solution, the permanent solution, I would say. So listeners, you are listening to yet another interesting and amazing episode of Illuminating Mind Matters with BASANT. And if you are learning, if you are knowing about a lot of things as I am doing, do contact BASANT. BASANTnow.org is the website. And if you would like us to discuss something in specific, if you have any idea, if you are seeing something around you and you want us to pick that topic on the show, info@basantnow.org is where you can write. Once more, it's info@basantnow.org. Or you can just give them a call, 510-770-6223. And do tune in. Our program airs every Wednesday, 12:30 to 1 p.m. So with those reminders, Shalini, let's plunge back in our topic.
Thank you, Vedika, for reminding our listeners.
Can I say something about what she said? Because what I wanted to say was what's really nice about looking at things through connection and attachment is that it's not making anybody the bad guy or making anybody sick.
Absolutely. Yes.
Because guess what? I have attachment needs to my husband, to my siblings, to my, parents. And those all have to be honored, right? And it's just a matter of when those don't get met. If we're trying to get them met in dysfunctional ways, that's what causes the problem. So I appreciate you highlighting that, because that's really what makes it exciting.
Absolutely.
For me, I don't have to make somebody a diagnosis.
Right.
I think that is a very important aspect of our work. I mean, it's easy, DSM-5 can label people, doctors can label people, but we work from a very humanistic, client-centered perspective. It's the person, not the label. So that is important. I was curious about how do you address, the issues of gender roles and in-laws, because that's a big issue that comes up. And I hear that often in South Asian cultures, a lot of men take care of their parents with or without the consent or support at times from their partners. And it creates tremendous acrimony. And including gender roles are very rigidly defined in many a household. And of course, they become, when there's rigidity, as you said earlier, it gets in the way of attachment.
Right. And I think, my cultural background is going to be a little bit different as far as South Asian expectations, right? Because I took care of my dad for about 10 years, but he was in Wisconsin. I was able to do it over the phone. I made sure I got him a place. So I would have had him here, but it would have been too much to bring him here. But there was no expectation, right? And we help with my husband's parents in a different way, but there's no expectations that they'd actually come and live here. And is that some of that expectation that comes up? And I think what you're talking about, Shanley, is how do we manage multiple attachments?
Yes.
Right? And how do I reassure my partner that I love them, and how do I love my parents and honor them without somebody feeling hurt? And I think a conversation has to be brought up around it specifically. We have multiple, and then also the idea of maybe the gender roles or things that are historically more, I'm guessing, traditional gender roles. You know, and we can have conversations about that, because here we are. It's a, you know, my parents had different gender roles than I do with my husband, right? And invite and I think we can open up conversations about the couple. So, do you want this kind of a traditional gender role? Does it work? Because sometimes some people like it. And they want to stay with it. And I think the hard part about change is that it feels like we maybe are dishonoring our history or our culture or our family. And I think we have to open those up in light of how do we remain attached and connected to people, even if we change our behavior, right? How do we include, because we are here in the United States and we're in this sort of mixed, anybody who's live somewhere else and live somewhere different is a third culture. We're no longer are old, and we're not really, we're acculturated, but we're not necessarily straight up, right? We're this mixed bag. And so I think we have to talk about it. Are people willing to be flexible and respond to the partner? Like, you know, if there's a partner who has concern about it, can you open up? Can you be available? Can you be responsive? Can you be engaged? Because if somebody knows that they're loved and respected, then they're like, oh, okay. If you need to take care of your parents more, it's okay. But if they feel like they're not, then they're going to be like, no, I want you for me. I mean, that's my response. I don't know, maybe other people aren't that way, but if I feel like I'm loved, I'm like, sure, go ahead, go take care of them. I don't care. I mean,
there will be
so,
more
you know what I'm saying, a
acceptance.
tongue in cheek, but
Yes.
you're smiling.
Yes, there will be more acceptance. I was just saying.
Yeah, if you feel loved, then you're like, oh, I'm cool.
Yes.
I mean, not always, but you know. Does that answer your question?
That is, it did. And you bring up such an important point about loving and respecting your partner. So to strengthen a relationship, what would you suggest to your listeners? What can they do to strengthen their relationship?
Well, it's always, I don't know about you, but when I am able to get away and be away with my husband, I actually kind of feel more warm and fuzzy. You know, I mean, if I'm the day to day and then there's the dishes and the work and everything else, you know, so we can sit in front of the television at the end of the night, but that doesn't really bump. But if we're going away, doing things together. So taking those, I think, divided moments. I mean, and my parents were good models. They went out like probably twice a month. They went out on a date together, and I really remember it because that was the only time back, you know, in the 60s we could get potato chips and Coke. When the babysitter came, I'm like, go.
When are you leaving?
Once my sister stuck gum in the cat's hair and cut the cat's whiskers. When the babysitter was
horrifying.
Anyhow, but carving out time for the relationship. And when you have small children, when you have busy work, it's not very easy, but it's really, really helpful. Because it creates that sense of circle around the relationship. Or if you have parents that you're taking care of, right? I mean, I'm thinking of a couple now who has to have their older parents living with them because one of them has a severe dementia. Well, they don't get a lot of time to themselves, so they have to find somebody to come and watch the kids, even if it's for a couple hours. That creating memories, having a hobby together if you can. Not everybody
Mhm,
can. Not everybody has the same
mhm,
interests.
mhm,
That gives you something to chat about, to kind of little
mhm,
connect on a
mhm,
different level, because I think people think of connection as just being that deep emotional stuff, but
mhm.
it's social, it's emotional, it's intellectual, it's physical, it's, hobbies. There's multiple ways to connect in my opinion. But
Okay. That is, I'm glad that you brought up the whole different, the different ways the couples can stay connected. And how can EFT, the principles of EFT, attachment, and all the different ways that we connect to each other could be used in a parent's relationship with their kids, and especially in terms of like teenagers and young adults? What do you suggest?
yeah, well, teenagers are a mixed bag, aren't they?
Oh,
They
yes.
they they want to be close one day and then they want to be independent the next day or the next 5 or 6 days,
Mhm,
right?
mhm, mhm,
And so they're a little bit of an expect, but you have to remember they still have the need and the longing to be understood.
mhm, mhm,
And
mhm,
like, I think all behavior, it makes sense somehow, so if you come at
mhm,
it that way. So
mhm.
yeah, EFT does a lot of work with families. You can get
Uh-huh.
family
Mhm.
therapy and it works at
Yes.
strengthening the bond. It works at, it's not going to be the same as couples therapy where you
Yes.
share the vulnerability straight up, because
Mhm,
the kids don't need to know the vulnerability of the parents, right?
mhm. No. Mhm,
But it
mhm.
opens up the communication and opens up
Yes.
what
Mhm,
needs are being missed, and it can help parents kind of be informed and a parent
mhm.
according to what their kids are needing, because one kid may have a different need than the other,
Yes. Mhm, mhm,
right?
mhm.
So yeah.
Okay. What are some of the challenges during this pandemic times that you're seeing oh, I know, I see you
Sorry,
like,
did I just like sigh and
yes,
breathe and take a
yes,
deep
you
breath? Yeah,
did,
okay,
you
yeah.
did. And it is such a big topic. What are you seeing?
Well, I mean, people have to be together more, so they're going to be more frustrated and annoyed with each
Mhm,
other, and their attachment needs are going to be boinging all over the place, and they're going to notice when they're not met more.
mhm. Yes. Mhm,
So they're going to be more frustrated and mad. And what I've
mhm,
noticed, and I think it's sort of shifting, it's kind of interesting. I think it's shifting now that things are opening up and people are feeling like they can do other things.
mhm,
But
mhm,
I felt like people started feeling really stuck.
mhm.
And
Oh,
and there's a
yes,
lot of
yes.
pressure. And
Mhm,
think about this. I mean, no human being can completely support another human being,
mhm, mhm, mhm,
right? We're multifaceted. We have multiple attachments. We have
mhm,
multiple
mhm,
interests. So it's everybody started to have to focus on each other. So I
mhm,
think
mhm.
those patterns got a little bit more rigid, and we're trying to expand them and shift them. But I think that's what happened with all the other stressors. And then of course you have to homeschool your children. Well, that's going to make it's just the stress. The stress is increased, and when the stress increases, people's negative reactions increase. And so I think the
Mhm,
patterns were a little bit more rigid the past year.
mhm,
But
mhm.
I'm seeing that
Yes,
if people have a little bit more freedom, room to breathe,
yes,
they're able to kind of step
yes,
back and
yes,
shift a bit more.
yes. And one of the things with attachment is we do need our needs, to be met ideally by our loved
Yeah,
ones. We also need
yeah.
our needs met by friends, by
Hmm.
colleagues, by other people. So it's got to be a network of people. It's not just our close
And
family
and
because
that's what's been cut, I think, over the
yes,
past year.
yes.
So okay, so there's more pressure and strain on the couple
Hmm.
relationship or the family
Hmm.
relationships where you're at work, you have a good friend there that meets some of your needs, you go to a
Hmm.
yoga class, you have some of your
Hmm.
needs met there,
Hmm.
you're with your partner and spouse at dinner time, those needs get met. Well, all those kind of started becoming, and one, like I said, none of us can meet another person's needs 100%. That's
No.
unrealistic.
So, tell me two things, as a wrap up. Are two important takeaways that you would like our listeners to leave here today?
Well, I think I'd like people to know that if they feel stuck and they
Hmm.
feel like they're in a repetitive pattern,
Hmm.
that they can't break out of, that therapists can help them. That's what we're skilled at. We can
Hmm.
help
Hmm.
them map out what that pattern is,
Hmm.
understand what drives it, and help them start to learn to talk differently
Hmm.
to each other to
Hmm.
break that
Hmm.
pattern, and then reestablish new ways of communicating where they
Hmm.
do feel more connected and attached
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
more secure. Because the idea is, if you feel securely connected and attached, well, then you can go out and conquer the world, right?
Yes.
You come back to your
Yes.
family, to your loved ones, to your um, group, and then you
Mhm,
go out to the world.
mhm,
So I think that would the message that I would like to give is that if you feel really stuck and like you're in pain, there is help. There are a lot of therapists trained in EFT and even other models that incorporate attachment science
yes. Yes.
that are there to help people. So I guess
Okay.
that's my message. If you feel
Okay.
stuck, there's help.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful message. And thank you for explaining EFT and attachment. And with that, I give it back to Vedika.
Thank you so much, Evelyn, and for bringing such an important topic out so positively and like keeping everybody on the same balanced ground, nobody to blame, nobody to hide from. So thank you so
Right.
much once more. And thank you, Shalini, for bringing Evelyn for our listeners. And listeners, you were listening to Illuminating Mind Matters with Basant. Let me remind you once more that if there is something happening around you in the community, or if you are going through something you want us to discuss on the show, you are more than welcome to write to us info@basantnow.org. Once more, it's info@basantnow.org, or you can visit the website basantnow.org to know more about it, or just to give them a call 510-770-6223. And as Evelyn rightly said, don't wait. Don't wait for 5-7 years to complicate the situation. Just contact a professional as soon as you can. So, with that, thank you, ladies. Thank you so much. That is the end of our today's show. And this is Arjun Vedika signing off. We'll see you next Wednesday, 12:30 p.m. Till then, GA